Call the Cumberland School Committee meeting to order at 6:16 and ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Pleasure of the committee. Motion by Mr. Fiorello, second by Mr. Salvatore. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Next item is appointment of subcommittee and school liaisons. We have fiscal management, policy and procedure, achievement and communication, and school liaisons. We did do some of this last week because we were having fiscal management, but I'll just read some of these into the record. The rest of them will be available on the district's website. And once we get down to the liaisons, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, policy and procedures subcommittee, the chair is Mr. Fiorello, with Mr. Denon and Mr. Salvatore serving. Fiscal management is Mr. D'Amatico with Mr. Fiorello and Mr. Denon serving. Achievement and communications is Mrs. Teal is the chair with Mrs. Bullio and Mr. Duffy serving. Special programs subcommittee is Mr. Salvatore is the vice chair, and that is a mandated one by the Department of Education. In addition, we have school calendar subcommittee that will remain. Thank you. With school calendar is Mr. Salvatore, Mr. Fiorello, and Mr. D'Amatico, with Mr. Salvatore as the chair. School start time, Mr. Duffy, with Mr. D'Amatico and Mr. Salvatore serving. The BEP subcommittee will be myself as chair with Mrs. Teal and Mr. Denon serving. The Cumberland Preschool Center in Ashton School. Now these are the liaisons to the individual schools, and the method of madness around this was if you have a child that attends that school or you are within the district, you will be the one or more of the liaisons to the schools. The preschool in Ashton School, Mr. Denon, Mr. Salvatore. BF Norton School, Mr. Fiorello. Community School, Mrs. Teal and Mr. Denon. Garvin School, Mr. Fiorello. Cumberland Hill Elementary School, Mr. Salvatore. McCourt Middle School, Mr. D'Amatico, Mr. Fiorello. North Cumberland Middle School, Mrs. Teal, Mr. Salvatore. Cumberland High, we have a plethora of parents who are either in the district or have students. Mr. Denon, Mrs. Teal, Mr. Duffy, Mr. Salvatore. I will not be one of the liaisons, although, I don't even have a high school student anymore. Imagine that. They're all graduated, that's right. Democracy Prep, Blackstone Valley Prep, Mr. Duffy. Woonsocket Area Technical, Mr. Duffy. Beacon Charter for the Arts, Mr. Salvatore. Cumberland Special Education Advisory Council, Mr. Fiorello. The Business Advisory Board, I will serve on that. And Cumberland Town Council Liaison is Mr. Fiorello. Mr. Duffy?
Yeah, just on the Woonsocket Area Career and Technical Center, I would ask that if you could relieve me and actually put Paul in, because he does have a child at that school at this time.
Oh, my apologies, yes.
Thank you.
You are relieved. Anyone else? No. Okay, next item, discussion and or vote to approve payment for girls co-op Cumberland Lincoln Ice Hockey Team for years 2012-13 and 13-14. Mr. D'Amatico, I believe this was in fiscal management this evening.
Yes, Madam Chair, was in fiscal management tonight. We identified a funding source for the 2012, 2013, and the 2013-14 overdue invoices due the Lincoln School Department for this co-op team. And we did make a motion to pay the bill in the amount of $20,590.72, and I do have some under discussion for that after it is moved for payment. I'll move that be paid.
Mr. D'Amatico moves passage of the payment for the girls co-op for the 12-13, 13-14 school years of an amount of $20,590.72. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Fiorello. Yes, Mr. D'Amatico, you had something
I
else.
did notice on the invoices that we got from the Lincoln School Department that first year, we paid for 2 uniforms, and we had 2 players. The second year, they charged us for 7 uniforms, but we had 7 players. So I think we should have been charged for 5 uniforms, because we would have had 2 already. So I would direct that the business manager look into that before just handing them the check.
Thank you. I think we can certainly have Mr. Prignano take care of that. Any other comments? So as we said in fiscal, we wanted to be clear about what the obligation on the school side was, because there's been a fair amount of confusion through either social media or through the newspapers. The school committee record, the minutes of the meeting for those times in which we approved the co-op did not include any payment. It was never in the budget. It was not anything that the committee had, when it approved it, it was a budget neutral expense. And I think it's important that that information is in the record. Moving forward, if there were to be any action on the committee's part, as I said, in that meeting, we presently don't have it in this year's budget, and I know it was a matter that was taken up by fiscal management, but I think it's important for us to recognize the level of funding and the commitment for students, because, as I said in that meeting, the cost per student is significant, and it's in excess of $2,000 per student, where all of our other sports, the next most expensive sport is boys hockey, which is around $1,100 per student, followed by golf and football, which I think are in the 600s, and the remaining sports are all less than that, so it does create a disparity. And additionally, any parent that has ever had to fundraise around those types of activities before knows how hard it is, and may feel a little slighted around the fact that they had to do it for their activity. The committee also made a budget adjustment last year to support middle school sports. That was the priority that the committee had selected, so I think all of that needs to be noted in the record this evening. Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. So the motion and a second. Any further discussion? Mrs. Teal.
I just would like to ask a couple questions, because it absolutely was clearly noted that there was an expectation that there would be some fundraising taking place, and now we're entering into year 3. Do we know if any fundraising has taken place, or has any donations been made to support this activity?
Mr. DeMonica.
Mrs. Teal, I did see a newspaper clipping tonight after this meeting, the fiscal meeting, that talked about the Cumberland Lincoln girls hockey team having a wine tasting at the Twin River, I guess it was Twin Rivers Casino. And I think we need to ask where that money went. If they're having fundraisers and letting the public to believe it's going to be used for that purpose, where did the money go? I think we need to ask them.
So, Mr. DeMonica, in between fiscal and this meeting, I did speak with a few of the parents. They did state that they did form a committee to do their fundraising efforts, and that there is, they do have resources saved toward that effort. So, that's correct. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Mr. DeMonica?
Madam Chair, we did meet again tonight, fiscal, and we talked about the 2014-2015 Lincoln girls hockey team.
As well, and again, we identified a probable funding source from an administrative position that has not been filled. We took a vote 3-0 to pay the bill this year going forward, so the girls are not harmed and they get to play for this coming year, but we did explicitly tell them that there is no funding for next year. This is a one-time deal for this year, and that they need to contact the superintendent's office to discuss how it will be funded for going forward, if it does go forward. So we were very clear tonight that it's for this year and this year alone, and there is nothing in the budget for next year at this time to fund girls' sports, ice hockey.
And are you moving passage
I
of?
am moving passage.
Thank you, Mr. DeMonica. And do I have a second?
Just second for discussion.
Second by Mr. Salvatore. And do you have something?
Mr. DeMonica, so, I'm sorry, on the invoice, dues 1683. Do we know exactly what that is?
I believe that's for the Scholastic.
Right.
Okay.
Probably the amount to belong to the Rhode Island Interscholastic Association.
Thank you. Thank you.
And do we have the total on this, Mr. DeMonica?
Yes, we do. It's $18,642.89. That's for 9 girls. And again, I have my same concerns about they're charging us for 11 uniforms, and it is 9. So it does need to get rectified because we've already paid now for 9 uniforms between the last two of the years. So I don't think we should be paying anything for uniforms at this time.
We should have plenty of young rooms. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and the only thing I would add is when we do provide a general agreement with them, that the whole amount is made available to the school department prior to the end of our fiscal year, so that we do know, once we reconcile our budget, if that revenue is available for the girls, and it allows them, as they noted in their comments, that they had practice over the summer, so that would allow them to make those arrangements around that. Mr. Fiorillo?
Yeah, I'd also like to see an actual written agreement between us and Lincoln, spelling out the entire program, who's responsible for what going forward.
Excellent. Anyone else? Mr. Duffy?
Along the same lines, I believe all the past in the past, but going forward, any other teams that might come before us, I think we have to have some type of a practice or a formal policy on how we move forward with, whether it be a club, somebody that wants to go into Scholastic or co-op, how we approve them if it's going to be with another school district, and what the process is for somebody to actually become a funded team by us. I think we have to, we're caught off guard with this, and I think we have to make sure that going forward we have a clear process in place. Thank you.
And I believe that athletic director and the administration can provide some input around that. The one thing I would caution you is we just don't want to obligate ourselves for something we may not be able to afford. So with other sports, we've covered them in a certain amount of years they've received funding. We just can't, I think it's a challenge to be able to give them a light at the end of the tunnel, but not to hamstring the school community budget for that amount of money, especially given the significance of cost for some of our sports over the others. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0. The committee has approved the funding for this school year for girls hockey. Next item on the agenda, discussion and/or vote to approve resolution SCPR 11-2014-19, chimney repairs at BF Norton. Mr. DeMonica, that's up to you again.
Madam Chair, fiscal did meet tonight on a 3-0 vote. We voted to award the contract for the repair to the BF Norton chimney to Cornerstone Restoration of Barrington, Rhode Island, in an amount not to exceed $16,800. They did work for us before at Cumberland Hill this time, and they're the most responsive. So I would move that we approve this SCPR-11-2014-19.
Mr. DeMonica moves passage of the resolution. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fiorillo. Any further discussion? Just quickly, when would that construction begin?
Hopefully we'll contact the
The vendor?
contractor tomorrow, and I think the weather's supposed to break a little bit next week. Maybe you can get it next week. So he finished the first one at Cumberland Hill. We had 3 problematic chimneys. 2 of them are done, the high school and Cumberland Hill. We now want to do the last one.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0. Not yet? Nice try. Next item on the agenda, we are not taking action on the employment contract, so that's item 8 or item 9.
Let me check.
So we will follow with personnel recommendations. Mrs. Vogel.
Good evening. So I just have a few recommendations for you this evening. The first is a retirement. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the retirement of John Jazanowski, boys and girls varsity tennis coach for the Cumberland School Department, effective November 10th, 2014. I believe Mr. Jazanowski has been with us for approximately 30 years as the tennis coach.
That's wonderful. Pleasure of the committee. Mr. Duffy.
I'd like to make a motion to accept as read.
Motion by Mr. Duffy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Tila. Mr. Fiorello. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
I also have an appointment for you this evening, well, several, but one teacher appointment. So I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of Jennifer Droznick, speech language pathologist for the Cumberland School Department, effective Thursday, November 20th. She'll be a full-time. She's a step 10 with a master's, and she would have a 22% copay under the contract.
Pleasure of the committee.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion by Mr. Fiorello.
Tomorrow.
Mr. DeMonico. Sorry. Second by Mr. Fiorello. All right, we're all making mistakes tonight. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
Lastly, I would request the advice and consent of the school committee on the appointment of the coaches as outlined, you want me to read them, I will, as outlined in Mr. Tahasian's memo dated November 5th, 2014. As you remember, we did the middle school coaches because they started on Monday. The reason we put the high school coaches on for tonight is that their season starts December 1st and our next meeting's not until December 11th, so we wanted to make sure that they were appointed. I did upload all of the information into the Google Drive Monday mornings, and I believe that they're all fully
Present and accounted for.
complete, yes, and all certified as well.
That's good news, thank you. Pleasure of the committee, would you like to have them read into the record, first of all? No. So if you could forward those to Mr. Denon, who's our clerk this evening, you can do it electronically, and I think that's, I'm sure we do.
I got it to your left
And
hand.
just make sure that he has it so that that can go into the written
Sure.
record.
Madam Chair, make a motion we approve.
Motion by Mr. DeMonica, second by Mr. Fiorello. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
I think that's it.
Those opposed? That motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is comments from the public. Does anyone in the public wish to speak this
We're all
evening?
set. We're all set.
Mr. Salvatore, does someone wish to speak?
No. Oh, I'd like to say something, Madam Chair, after the public speaks.
Oh. We will call the public hearing closed at this point. Mr. Salvatore, you have something you'd like to say?
Would just like to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody on the board and in the audience.
Thank you very much. Everyone hear that? Mr. Fiorello?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Duffy. All those in favor? Those opposed? And we are adjourned in record time at 6:34.